What about the separation of church and state? We hear that all the time. And somebody wrote a letter to Father Spitzer's University and said, you know, I don't vote on my religion, I vote on the issues. In a sense, this idea of the church should not be telling me how to vote.
You know, one of the reasons, Father Mitch mentioned the historical circumstances. Most of our ancestors came over here to get away from religious persecution specifically, whether it was the established churches in the British Isles, the Church of Ireland, the Church of England, or even from the Catholic powers in Europe that oppressed those freedoms as well. And they came over here for that freedom. It's why it's the first right of the, and so it was a feature of the thinkers who produced the Constitution and the Declaration of Liberty, with all the faults of how the country has applied it ever since, that you could not build a just or peaceful or free society on anything other than a moral and religious people, as John Adams described it. And without a moral and religious people, those who are beholden to an authority outside of themselves, today we're not beholden to authority outside of ourselves. We're beholden to earthly authority, to earthly experts who want us to do certain things. So that the persecution which Father Mitch mentioned in the culture, it sort of makes the Puritans look very libertine in their ideas by comparison. Because short of burning people at the stake, they vilify them, they destroy careers and lives and so on. And so we're very much there. And another period that's interesting, and I won't elaborate on it, is Germany in the middle of the 1800s with Bismarck and the German theologians, the development of liberal theology. The Pope had to write twice to the German bishops to talk about these ideas. One, the importance of education, because from that the governmental leaders without morals will come if it's bad. And the other one is the issue of the teaching, that to follow, as we've all said, the teaching of the tradition on all of these matters. That's the safeguard. That's where you get the certainty of conscience that Father Spitzer talked about.
Father Mitch?
I was going to say, it's very important, especially for those of us who live in Alabama, to remember that separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. This was a principle stated in a letter by Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, was not present at the writing of the Constitution. He was, at the time, our ambassador to France. But he wrote a letter when Baptists in Connecticut were prohibited from building a church by the Congregationalists who ran Connecticut. That line was taken in a court decision in 1947 and then a second one, I believe, in 1948 by Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black of Alabama, a man who got to the Senate riding on the wave of the Ku Klux Klan, was a member of the Klan, and who wrote the law in Oregon prohibiting Catholic schools from being permitted back in 1922. And this is the gentleman who hated the church, and to prevent the Catholic kids from riding school buses in New Jersey and getting textbooks, he came up with that principle from Thomas Jefferson's letter, put it into a court decision, 2 court decisions, where he wrote the majority, that there's a wall of separation between church and state. Once he got that into the Supreme Court background, in a precedent, then it was used again in '62 to prohibit prayer and scripture, then in '82 to prohibit even the presence of the 10 Commandments in schools. But that's not in the Constitution. Right. And this is not a basic value of our nation. And while we don't want established religion, we don't want the church to run the government. Right. Either way, still, we have to watch the use of this so that it then becomes an absolute separation by which my religion makes no effect. When that happens, then, as Colin said, you have a major problem.